welcome everybody to this week's session. For those of you who've joined us in the past, you kind of know the drill, but for those of you who are brand new to our live sessions that we do every Wednesday, welcome and thank you so much for joining today. I always kick off these sessions by telling people, these sessions are completely unstructured. Deanna and I, we chatted once a couple weeks ago about this, but we really haven't had a lot of conversation before then about what we're going to talk about. So a couple quick things. We'll kick things off. Deanna and I are going to chat a little bit about, making your way out of corporate America and what that means to each of us and a little bit of about our experiences. But a big part of what we do during these sessions is we answer your questions. So you'll see at the top of the screen, there's a little questions tab with a little question mark in it. You can click on that and submit your questions to us, to either myself, Deanna, really about anything. And then maybe about halfway through, we'll start tackling those questions. And of course, feel free to say hi in chat and introduce yourself as we get started. So hi, Deanna, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. So I've been thinking about this all morning and I've been so excited to tell everybody the weird story about how we met each other. It's a really weird story. Maybe it wasn't as weird for you as it was for me. But before we do that, before I tell everybody the weird story about how we met each other and how this whole session came about, everybody, who you are, what you are, where you're from, all those good things.
So my name is Deanna Furlong, and I'm based in Northern California in wine country in Sonoma, and I work from my home here. I'm born and raised in Arizona, and then lived in Boston for about a decade, and then went to San Francisco, and now I'm up here. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And so your background's in learning, right? Can you tell everybody a little bit about like how you got into learning? And because I know you have a very diverse background in learning and education and instructional design.
So my journey is very bizarre.
Yeah.
My sister picked my career. So it's a little funny, a little weird. When I was in undergrad, I got an English degree, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to be a school teacher, and I thought law school would be too long, too expensive, and there's really not a lot else you can do with an English degree. So I decided to go to grad school, and my sister said, well, what do you think you're going to study? And I said, I have no idea. She said, well, what did you like in undergrad? And I said, well, I really liked this course called Writing for the Profession. And in actuality, the name of the course, and I thought it was, you get to do like creative writing or like journalistic type writing or book writing. But what it ended up being was like technical writing procedure, process, technical documentation. And I actually really enjoyed it, and I was really good at it. So I'm like, I like this. And my sister was actually one of the founding members of Motorola University, which is like huge. Back in the day, like one of the, cutting edge leading people. And so she said, oh my God, you should do what I do. You should be an instructional designer. And no one does it. There are so few people, you'll totally get a job right away. And so I applied to the school, and I had really strong GRE. My undergrad was really poor. It was like a 2.8. I had a good time. Really good time in college. And I went to ASU. So
oh yeah, that's a party college.
There you go. So I went and applied to psychology and adult learning.
Okay.
And it was a highly competitive program at ASU, and it was pretty small. And it was my sister's personal friend ran it, and he's like, so I'm going to be super honest with you. You'll never get into this program. But we have this new program called Instructional Multimedia and Computers. And I think you'd be a great fit for that. And I heard computers, and I was like, oh, cool. What's that? And so I got into that program. Yay.
Yeah.
And so I have my master's, which it's basically instructional technologies. I mean, it's morphed over time, and you get called a million different things, but it's like a dual discipline. So you still had to do like almost all the same courses as psychology of adult education. But then on top of that, you learned how to use authoring tools. And back
Mm-hmm.
in the day, we used like, what was it?
Authorware or
No, it was even more, not Premiere. Oh, I don't know.
yeah.
It was a Macromedia product, but
Oh, okay.
yeah. So no, it wasn't HyperCard, but that's crazy. um, you're old school like me. Oh no, but I used RoboHelp when I worked at Honey.
Robo.
So I made kind of like my winding way into that. And so when I started, it was all boutique e-learning
Yeah.
firms. So nobody did anything in-house. You vended it to different companies. So when I finished grad school, I applied it at a bunch of different places. I applied at United Airlines, McDonald's Corporation in like Illinois. And so your choices were either these boutique houses or really giant corporate monoliths.
Yep.
And I really wanted to live in a big city, but I got a job offer from this tiny shop called Three Dog Multimedia in Santa Cruz, California. And so, like any good Arizona girl, I was like, oh my God, I get to live on the beach. I'm
Yeah.
out of here. So I went there, but my winding path is I worked for a lot of these really tiny e-learning boutique firms. And then all of a sudden people figured out, wow, why are we paying so much money to have other, these firms do it when we could do it in-house? And so slowly it all started coming inside the business. And that's when I came inside the business. So yeah, that's kind of
Good. Yeah, it's interesting how the industry has evolved. As I think I've talked about this before, about why people need portfolios, but I think it stems from the fact that so many of the tools that we use every day, if you can use PowerPoint, then you can create e-learning, with most of the tools that you're using. And as a result of that, I think, to your point, more and more organizations have been expecting their instructional designers and learning professionals to take on that responsibility where they would otherwise, outsource it to a small bespoke or boutique,
yeah.
e-learning firm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really excellent point. So the last role I had was solely video learning. And
Yeah.
so all I was doing was like writing video scripts, which for someone with my background was really frustrating, frankly, because I didn't touch any of my tools. And toward that end, I highly encourage anyone who does find themselves in that sort of role. If you find yourself moving really far away from your tool set, practice, find a way to do stuff on the side, because I scrambled for probably a good 4 months building out e-learning and relearning Storyline, which I was an expert user 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm doing here now.
Well, I think that's a good. So let me tell everybody the story, because I think that's a good segue into how we met, and how I think you unknowingly helped me do exactly what you just described. So years ago, I say years ago as if it was like 10 years ago, before I started my own business in 2019, I spent almost 3 years at GoDaddy as their director of instructional design. And Deanna, you worked at GoDaddy as well. And one day, I can't remember when this was. I want to say this was probably, if I left in 2019, it was 2018 when things were really bad, because I left at the beginning of 2019. Really bad for me. So I think in 2018, I remember, yeah. In 2018, I remember one day, one of the things they used to do at GoDaddy is every week or every month, HR would send out this blast of emails to everybody about the open positions within the company. And one day I got the email and I was scrolling through it, and there was a title. Somebody was hiring an instructional designer. And immediately I was like, what's this? Who's hiring an instructional designer? Because I manage the instructional design team. I'm not hiring an instructional designer. And my immediate thought initially was, and if anyone's ever experienced this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And my immediate thought was, oh gosh, one of our stakeholders went rogue and now they're trying to create their own little instructional design team, because sometimes they do that, right? They go, oh, we'll create our own little training team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went, and I think I went as far as I escalated it to my VP at the time. And I'm like, find out who the heck is hiring an instructional designer in the company. And long story short, it was the customer education team in the marketing department, which I had no idea existed. There was a whole team of instructional designers. And
it was weird. We had like this bizarre Chinese wall between us. So
yeah.
while I'm creating product education for customers, Tim's kind of his group is creating almost in parallel with us, which is moronic, this same content to train the call center employees on how to, teach customers to use it. So I have no idea other than corporate weirdness and silos as to how we had never met before, which was bizarre.
It's a perfect example of everything that's wrong with corporate America, not just GoDaddy, but like the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. And so I remember at the time, so at the time in my job, you kind of mentioned this, like once you drift away from the skills that you want to be doing every day. So at the time, I was managing like 18 instructional designers. I hadn't touched Storyline in like a year and a half. I was unhappy and I really wanted to get back into design. And so I thought, ooh, maybe I'll take a step down and go into this instructional design role. And so I scheduled this meeting with you. And I remember we had this conversation, and you essentially talked me out of it. You're like, no, you don't want this. And at the time I thought I wanted it, but I really didn't want it. And we're going to talk about this, but the thing that you said to me the other week that made me realize what I was doing, you said to me the other week when we chatted about this, was that you have to know whether or not you're running towards something or running away from something when you're making a job switch. I was totally running away from something. So that story of how we know each other, but maybe we talk a little bit about that running towards or running away from something. Where did you learn that in your career? And what does that mean to you?
So that came from a manager that I had in one of my iterations of being an instructional designer, which was I designed sales training. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting is a lot of people don't understand how many different facets of e-learning and instructional design there is. So then, there's learning and development, and then there's higher education. But in between, there's like all of these different little niches, like customer education, B2B, B2C, all of this stuff. And there's also sales training. Yep. So I had an incredible manager, Kelly Hippler, and I was talking to her about, they asked me if I wanted, at Forrester Research, they asked me if I wanted to take on a new training and certification product. And I said, oh my gosh, absolutely. That would be so cool. But I was really nervous, and I was really burnt out on sales training. It's very like rah rah and hardcore, and it has a lot of like soft skill motivational stuff to it. And I was kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I should stay put. Maybe I shouldn't. And I was burned out on the sales training. She's like, well, think about it this way. You always want to be running towards something that you want, not away from something you don't want or you're trying to escape. Otherwise, you'll never really be satisfied wherever you go, because it's not a destination. It's something you kind of stumbled into or ran into trying to flee something else. And I feel like the vast majority of my career has been like survival. I wrote about this in my blog post. It's been like, I need to be able to pay off my student loans. And I need good health insurance. I have, a long-term chronic illness, and I have to have daily medication. So I need really good insurance. So I kind of just went from role to role to role. I've been laid off 6 times.
Oh, wow.
Because I like working in small startups, and I like e-learning. So, and for a long time, there were very few people that did it. So you either knew exactly what I did and had to have my skill set, or you didn't care at all, know what I did or whatever. And so, as you know, the startup goes under, training's the first thing always to go.
Yeah.
They don't need us.
Yeah.
Um, but, and so just it became like a passive exercise and not very fulfilling in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I think I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, one of my mentees, and she was talking about she's currently a classroom trainer facilitator, and she's been trying to get into instructional design and get more into the content development. And the thing she said to me was, I asked her, I said, well, have you told your boss or your leadership team that that's what you want to be doing? And if so, how have they reacted? And she said, yeah, she told them that, and they kind of like patted her on the head. And the thing I told her was, I said, well, then what you need to do is you need to ask yourself whether or not that opportunity for whatever it is that you're looking for, is it going to happen there? And if not, does that mean you need to go find it somewhere else? And I think one of the, going under the theme of running towards something rather than running away from something and trying to make your own way, even if that means ditching corporate America or switching jobs, is I think one of the things a lot of people struggle with, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Deanna, is that I think there's so many things that society teaches us of the way we're supposed to do things. Like we're supposed to, like if um, you're supposed to get married and have kids, or you're supposed to go to college, get in a bunch of debt, land a big corporate job, and then stay there forever, and then retire from that, in Sarasota, Florida, or some crazy shit like that, right? And sounds like a nightmare to me. And so I think for a lot of people, they struggle with owning their own path in their career and realizing and being empowered with going, no, I'm not going to do whatever I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. Or maybe I need to let this go and leave it behind and make my own way. And that might mean leaving that company or something. I don't know. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Have you
Yeah,
experienced that?
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because people are like, oh, why don't you just go freelance? And I'm like, well, because I have a mortgage, I need health insurance, I have kids that need to go to college, um, so many things. Money is a thing. And I mean, when I worked at GoDaddy, we trained people where we had a course, I should say, that was for small business owners that said, when do you take the leap?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is no perfect time. I'm going to tell you right now, there is no perfect time, but you can set yourself up for success by trying to eliminate as much debt as possible, understanding how much you need to live on in the assumption that you aren't successful. And I know, like, for a fact, like, people are like, oh, Tim's an overnight success, blah, blah. And now he has this great giant business. I know that you've been doing this for like years. And frankly, I just did it. And I am going to be 50 in October. It's scary. It's very scary. And
It's really scary.
I'm still not sure I'm doing it right. I'm not honestly very good at hustling for work. I've kind of just like meandered my way into a few contracts, but
Yeah. Well, if there's anything that doesn't describe me at all, it's overnight success. And if anyone thinks that out there, that's crazy town. So real quickly before we continue, I want to, for anyone who's just joining us, I see we have a question in the questions pod. We'll get to those in a moment. If you're just joining us, feel free to put those in there and then upvote on others, and we'll tackle those in a moment. I think this is something I said to this person the other day too, and what you just kind of said resonated with me about, maybe making your own way means going into freelancing or quitting a job, and having the option to do that is a privileged thing. And
It
I
is.
recognize that. Like, not everybody can
It's
just
a
quit. It's a privileged thing to say, no, I really don't need this, or I can make my own way this way. And a couple things I want to say about that is, there are some voices out there that I've heard or I've debated with where they say things like, "Oh, just like you said, just quit and be a freelancer," or just go be a freelancer straight out of college. And you know, eh, the problem with that is I think people who say that fail to realize that for the vast majority of people, if you're 30 plus, or even if you're in your 20s, but a lot of the people that I hear from who want to make these career shifts are usually in their 30s, because it's by the time you get in your 30s you really understand who you are, what you want, and you stop caring about all the BS that society tells you. But the thing is life is complicated. To your point, like this is the thing I always tell people: I had to write 2 books to pay off my student loans. All of that money went to paying off student loans.
Well, in fairness, I joke that I have like 150,000 shares of companies that never went public.
Right.
But one of them was purchased by Oracle, and that's how I paid off my student loans. I mean, what are the chances? They're like slim to none. So if you think you're getting like equity in this pre-IPO company, that's very rare. But I'm so lucky that happened.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I would have still been paying mine well into my 40s.
Oh yeah, I side thing. I was paying the minimum on my student loans for 10 years. I had $60,000 in student loans, and
that's around where I was.
And by time I had enough money to just throw cash at it, in those 10 years, it had gone down from 60,000 to like 53,000.
Yeah.
So that's where 10 years got me. So the only way to get out of it was to throw cash at it. And it was the hardest. It was so bittersweet, because I felt good that it wasn't on me anymore, but it didn't feel good to throw that much money at a bank. So
yeah, exactly.
okay, sorry, but what I was going to say is I think for a lot of people, freelancing or quitting your job or making your own way, it is a privileged thing, and life is complicated, and it's not always easy to do that. But you kind of you alluded to this a moment ago, and what I wanted to say was, what you have to do is, if you have a dream of where you want to be or whatever you're running to, whether that's freelancing or a different job or a different position, what you have to do, and what I spent the last 10 years of my career doing, was I describe it like this: like, you have to take inventory of your life and figure out what are those barriers that are in your way. And those barriers might be student loan debt, or it might be other forms of debt, or it might be not enough income, or it might be a bad employer who's standing in your way, or a bad boss who's standing in your way. And part of taking ownership of your career, I think, is sometimes doing what you have to do before you get to do what you want to do.
100%.
And so, like, when I took the job at GoDaddy, I would be lying if I said my sole reason when I took the job at GoDaddy in 2016, I'll be honest with you, I never wanted to manage people. I never wanted to be a learning leader at a technology company, but it paid well, and it allowed me to remove some barriers in my life. So I had to do what I had to do what I want to do. Does that make sense?
100%. And we talked about this too. I never want to manage people. I'm great at being a coach, and I love it. And I'm great at mentoring, and I love it. But I don't want to deal with the day-to-day, the performance reports, the mirroring stuff. I don't want to deal with that. And I always have been an individual contributor, and I loved it. And for the longest time, because I'm 23 years into my career as an IC only. I've been a product owner in the past, project manager, but never a people manager. And at one point I was like, people are never going to hire me. I make really good money. Why would you hire me as an individual contributor when there are people managers that you might pay less even than I do? But again, at Forrester, I had a woman say to me, don't ever apologize for being a skilled IC. You call yourself a practitioner. And that is a personal choice, and make it clear that it's a personal choice and you're very good and skilled at it. And that's your personal journey. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to say that from now on, because that's really what I was. And there isn't anything wrong with that. because people management, it takes a certain person who can do that, because you do have to be both the mentor and the practical day-to-day stuff. And I could, like, when I talk to you, I could hear it in your voice that you were just like, I'm drowning in people management. Never get to do anything fun anymore. So
No, you get to do a lot of awful things. Dealing with
yeah,
HR and people's
yeah,
fees, and that's the thing I learned about myself. So I was thinking about this the other day. There's a big difference from managing people to mentoring people. I love mentoring
me
people.
too.
I really hate managing people, and there's a big difference between those two things. Um, yeah. Okay. So we have some questions in the questions pod. Do you feel good transitioning to that, Deanna, to tackle
Sure.
some questions? Fantastic. Okay. So I'm gonna hop into those again as we answer these. Anyone else has? Oops,
Mhm.
sorry. Anyone else has questions? Throw those in there. You can upvote on others, and we'll tackle those one at a time. All right. So our first question comes from BJ. BJ wants to know, there are so many offshore development firms that are difficult to compete with, both in terms of price and capacity. How do you distinguish yourself from those powerhouses in order to carve a lucrative path for yourself? That's a really great question. I'll kick this one off, and Deanna, I'll be curious to know what you think about this. I think ultimately, I think it's less about competing with some of those offshore firms that are designing e-learning for pennies on the dollar,
Mhm.
and it's more about finding those clients who really know what they want. And I'll give you a great example of this. I'll get contacted by a client who wants me to develop e-learning. They've never done any e-learning development before. They know nothing about e-learning. I give them a fair bid or proposal on it, and then they're totally shocked by the price of it. They get sticker shock. And then they go, well, we can't afford you, so we're going to go to this offshore vendor who's going to develop all of this really cheap, horrible e-learning, and we'll do it really, really cheaply. Or they'll hire something off of like Fiverr for like
Mhm.
$10 to create a compliance course. And a lot of these companies who hire those, they have to go through that to realize, oh, they didn't get really what they wanted, before they realize they have to go pay for what they want with a
Mhm.
real
Mhm.
person. And so whenever I have a client like that who clearly is ignorant and of what it costs to get quality e-learning, then I just sit back and I go, okay, this will take care of itself, because they'll go get that crappy e-learning course from that crappy vendor, and then they'll come crawling back to me, maybe, right? I don't know, Deanna, what do you think on that?
100%. Because I have worked at companies, not just as freelance, but inside companies where they're like, oh, yeah, we got to vend this. We don't, you're like too small. You're a one person shop, and we're going to vend all of these compliance ones because those are, you can keep the leadership, but we'll, send out the compliance. And they come back and they're so bad. They're like, can you fix these? I'm like, not really. No. I mean, it'll take more time to fix them than it will for me to create them from scratch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're either going to, I see Andy Felice is on here, and we brought her in at Forrester because they tried to do that. They tried to vend out some of their, I think it was Salesforce training, and it came back and it was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And, then they had to suck it up and hire a really great freelancer to help me finish, all the heavy lifting. And I understand this is probably not the answer that you wanted to hear, but the fact is it does come around. Like Tim said, it will come around. And I think you can distinguish yourself with like a really high quality portfolio, really great examples of how skilled you are. Great, even a supporting design doc, like how you got from A to Z. And I'm this is terrible, but I always, because I did a lot of long distance running, and once upon a time I was a competitive gymnast. And my thing I always say to myself is only compete with your best self.
Yeah.
So if you know you're good at what you do, um, you just have to live in confidence of that, because there really is no way, if you want to make a living, there's no way to undercut them, because in fairness, the average salary for those people is a tenth of what we make in the United States. Like even like I'm moving to Spain and I'm freelancing, so that's fine. And most of my clients are in the United States right now. Only one of them is not. But I just for grins was looking at salaries over there, and like a senior instructional designer in Spain, at least, makes like 32,000 euro a year, which is about $36,000. And that's somebody with
Wow.
like a graduate degree and speaks two languages. So you have to speak one language in the EU and be fluent in English. So yeah, it's hard. It is hard to compete, but
Well, I think so. The thing that, and you kind of alluded to this, Deanna, and the thing I'll mention, BJ, you mentioned in your question, how do I compete with their capacity and their price? My answer is don't compete on capacity and price, compete on quality.
yeah,
Usually, when a company is outsourcing work, they're usually outsourcing it for one of two things: capacity or capability. And capacity, yes, they might go do the cheap route and hire a cheap firm or go buy something cheap off the shelf. Don't compete against it. Compete against the capability. Compete against the quality. And that's what I've always tried to do is rather than undercut my prices to compete with something that I'm not going to be able to compete with because I wouldn't be able to pay the bills, and then I'll compete on quality. People pay for quality, so.
They do. Ultimately, they do. And honestly, the onus is on you to demonstrate that, not to be too flippant.
You're totally right. Yeah.
So
That's why you need a portfolio. Everyone needs a portfolio.
everybody does. That is one thing that we used to get away with, like forever and ever. I will tell you for like at least the first 15 years of my career, I never showed anyone anything. I didn't have to. But you will not get a job anymore without one inside a company or freelance. Freelance, obviously not. But I mean, every ad I've seen lately says, be prepared to show it.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. Okay, cool. Hopefully that helped answer your question, BJ. All right, so our next question comes from Amelia. Hi, Amelia. Amelia wants to know, are companies still interested in hiring vendors or do they prefer in-house teams? So I think it depends. I think, some companies, it depends on, I think, where that company is at in their journey with e-learning or instructional design. If they're new, like I have a client right now that I'm in talks with, they've never done any e-learning before. And even if they wanted to do e-learning, they wouldn't know what to hire for. So it might make sense for them to outsource it. And again, it goes back to that capability, capacity, what are they really looking for? I think it depends. I don't know. What do you think on that, Deanna?
So what I've been finding too is because I get a lot of stuff through LinkedIn. I'm finding actually that more companies are bringing more small companies, I should say, are bringing e-learning in-house, but they also want to know that you're a really strong instructional designer because they want to know what it looks like soup to nuts. And I think more of them, more companies, especially tech companies, are savvy around the fact that they're going to have a hybrid solution. And if they're a B2B software company, they're going to want somebody who can train their partners. And they want to know that there's a continuum, like how do you onboard a customer to your app? And then how do you train somebody who maybe needs to configure it? Like I spoke with a small-ish software company, but they're like rocketing big. And they had like a subject matter expert doing all of their instruction, which we all know as instructional designers is not how it works. But so one thing I will say that I have seen vended, and even at GoDaddy we did initially, just because it is really heavy lifting, is like hardcore animation stuff.
Yeah.
So like if you're really, really skilled, I don't know, like After Effects or something like that, it probably behooves you because those are the things we vended, that and like super high-end video editing. Like we had at GoDaddy, we had our own studio and, and like the guy had a film school degree that shot our videos, and we had an actual producer. But that is like wildly unusual. If they're doing like high-end video editing, that's generally edited, or really high-end animation. But God, like stuff like Beyond even, and even Powtoons or something, people are like, why am I even vending that now? I don't need somebody who knows that. So I don't know. I think it's still a mix, but I would say more and more is coming in-house.
Well, I think I agree. I think it's either coming in-house, or more and more learning leaders, teams are expecting more capability from their instructional designers as all of those tools like Beyond and Storyline and Rise get easier and easier to use. I think now that I was thinking about this as you were talking, most of my clients that I've had over the last several years, they have in-house learning teams. They have in-house instructional designers. And so for me, and this is unique to me, this is not everyone's experience, but for me, they're usually hiring me because they need somebody to do something that they can't do on their team, whether it's doing something in Storyline or animation or visual design. And so usually the clients I love are the ones who really know why they're outsourcing something. They know what their intention is and what they want out of that freelancer.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think talking kind of outside both sides of my mouth, because I am freelancing, so I'm relying on people who, are going to vendors, but I still think there's a huge freelance market, because there are people who are like, have super mad skills in like Storyline, and it's hard to do that when you're in-house and you're not given the time or the budget to do it. So when they are vending, they are budgeting for that. So.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, good. I hope that answers the question, Amelia. All right. So, Anne DeFelice, it sounds like Deanna, you know Anne. Anne wants to know, I'll let you kick this one off, Deanna. What suggestions do you have for a portfolio when all of my work is or was confidential or proprietary? I have thoughts, but you kick it off, Deanna.
Nobody likes this answer, but you have to just suck it up and create at least a couple examples. Because, I mean, that's, like I said, once upon a time that would fly. Like, you could be like, I don't really have anything, because it's true. Like, everybody, I can't share a sales training strategy with somebody. I can't disclose any of that stuff, especially like the software companies that I work with. Like, all of that is not NDA, and you're never going to be able to sell that or show it or share it. Like, I know a couple of times I've walked it in, like on back in the day, on a CD-ROM or on a thumb drive, and showed it to them and said, I can do this. I can show you what it looks like, but I cannot hand it over. And if you do, I mean, you're liable if you hand over something that you've developed for somebody else. So, I mean, Tim did it I know you did it over a Christmas vacation or something.
Oh, yeah.
Storyline. So just, you can think of anything, something you know really well, and just, you have to do it.
So the reason I'm a proponent of creating your own samples is because I think most of the work you do 9 to 5 for your company is probably not portfolio worthy anyways, because it's boring topics. And, I've said this before, stakeholders and subject matter experts have this amazing ability of, taking your really great idea that you developed that first version and then bastardize it into like this click the next button to continue linear course. And so for me, I'm a big proponent of creating your own examples, because you have complete creative freedom. You're not under the pressure of a stakeholder. You're not under the pressure to deliver or make somebody happy. You can make it look and feel however the heck you want. And you have a real opportunity to showcase your skills in your own way. And so, at least half of the stuff on my portfolio is stuff that I created during my nights and weekends. And the example I always give is like the one on how to cook a turkey. I have a portfolio sample on how to cook a turkey. Not because I want
good and clever, and it's just got a lot of interaction, and it's interesting. And I would say, and maybe you disagree with me, I'm not sure, you don't necessarily have to build an entire course.
No, I totally agree with
So
that.
design it. I would design it like it was a full course, but maybe you develop one lesson and share the one lesson.
Yeah.
Nothing says that you have to share an entire course with somebody.
I totally agree with. I actually totally agree with. I was telling my the students in my academy program, one of the things I was trying to help them understand is you don't have to. It doesn't have to be a complete course, and depending on what you're trying to highlight in your portfolio, and this is going to get to the whole concept of your I forget what you call it. It's the Igiyagi or yeah. But it also doesn't have to be instructionally sound either. My how to cook a turkey course is not instructionally sound. If I were to teach a course on how to cook a turkey, it would be a very different course. But what it does illustrate is what I'm good at, what I want to be hired for, and what I want to be doing, which is visual design, interaction design in storyline. And that's what that illustrates, right? So I hope that answers that question, Anne. So okay, let's pause real quickly, and then we'll get back to the questions. We have a few more, but can you define? Because you introduced me to this whole. What's it called again? Like
it's called Ikigai, and it's
Ikigai.
it's a Japanese concept that translates to reason for being. And well, I just, like I said, I had stumbled through my career and nothing was, I don't know, it didn't feel very intentional. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't very fulfilling. I'm a service person. Like for me, it's not enough to create great learning that helps somebody. I need to be that person that's hands-on and seeing, a direct impact on somebody. In hindsight, I would have been much happier as like a social worker or, in some type of humanitarian organization. That's just really what I enjoy.
Yeah.
And then by the time I wanted to do that, I was like, oh, I have a mortgage, I have student loans, all of those things. And I'm like, I can't afford to work for a nonprofit. I just can't. So, Ikigai is the intersection of kind of what Tim said. So Tim's version was, what am I really good at? When I'm reading this, what do I enjoy doing? And what do I want to be hired for?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, if I put that into Ikigai, because Ikigai is, what do I love? What does the world need? What am I good at? And what can I be paid for?
Yeah.
So, I spent most of my life on the what am I good at and what can I be paid for side, like almost my entire life. Because again, you have to pay your bills. But you also then, if that's, if your priority is to be in the center of the Venn diagram where you have found your reason for being, and you are doing the things that you love that are fulfilling, and you do feel like you're making a difference in the world, then things have to give. So ultimately, I did pay off all my debt, but I genuinely spent 12 years ensuring that I have zero debt. And I've also learned how to live very, very simply, because in my head, it is a priority for me personally to have a job that is genuinely fulfilling. And I'm not saying you can't have like a job that pays a ton of money and is genuinely fulfilling, but I haven't. And now, like, that's really why I left corporate America, because it left me feeling hollow. It left my bank account very full. And I'm really good at what I do, but I didn't love it. Like, I like it. It's fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, sorry, I don't really think the world absolutely needs e-learning. Like,
No.
I'm thinking much bigger, higher order things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a big dreamer. So I'm like, I want the world to be more equitable, more just, more
Yeah,
compassionate. Those are my big things. And that I wasn't going to find that in corporate America.
I
And
get
so,
that. I
so I,
totally get that.
yeah, I made my plan, and my plan, because I see one of the questions, how long did it take you to build up your freelance business, to replace your corporate salary? And Tim probably will at some point, or if he hasn't already. I can tell you right now, I will probably never make per year what I was making previously, because not to be a snoot or anything, I'm paid on a San Francisco salary, even though I don't live in the city,
Yeah.
which means, it's a lot. And I was making really, really good money. But again, not my priority anymore. My
Mm.
priority was, something different.
Yeah, I get that.
So if your priority is money, and salary is super important to you, or those benefits are super important to you, then that's something you really need to think about. I mean, how long did it take you, Tim? Are you there? Are you?
Yeah, so well, let's tackle just. I went ahead and I marked. We're recording her question now, so you know, for me, I remember my first big e-learning project that I ever took. This was when I was still doing it on my nights and weekends. This was back in like 2012, 2013. I remember I had this realization uh, because I wasn't making a ton of money in the job I was working at the time. I was making good money I was in the $60,000 range, which at that time for me at that age was great. I thought that was fantastic. But I made more money in 6 months doing freelancing during my nights and weekends than I would have made in my whole year at my job. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is crazy. This feels wrong. Um, so, that was a huge concern of mine when I thought about making the leap full time into freelancing. And I've shared this story before, but I'll share it again. I reached out to, there were three people I reached out to: Kath Ellis, Jacqueline Hutchinson. Kath is a freelance e-learning designer in Australia. Jacqueline is a freelance e-learning designer in Canada. And then Kevin Thorne, he's a freelance e-learning designer here in the US, based out of Mississippi. And I asked them, I think it was two questions. I was like, how much money did you have in savings when you quit? Or how many months or weeks of savings did you have? And how long was it after you made the leap did you knew you were going to be okay? And so everyone had different answers. Some people had like several months worth of savings. Some people had a couple weeks worth of savings, which is crazy. But everybody said they knew right away, like within weeks, that it was going to be okay. So for me, I've shared this story before. I was super conservative about making that leap full time. My biggest fear was that if I do it, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna be successful. I'm not going to go back into my corporate job. So
That's huge.
that's why I spent 10 years working on building my brand and paying off debt and doing all these things. So for me, I don't say this to brag. I make way more than corporate America. So it's
Which is,
best
I'm
for me.
sure, way more than me. And because I was only ever an IC, I was never
Yeah.
a people manager, and you're never going to get paid that much. You'll never make more than a people manager. I don't think you will.
No, you probably made more than me there. Trust me, because
Um,
nobody in HR gets the people in HR, which is the org, they get the short end of the stick when it comes to
yeah.
salary.
Well, yeah, in fairness, at one point we were part of marketing, which has an
Yeah,
enormous budget.
yeah,
But like, it is, again, back to that video that I created for GoDaddy. I did a ton of research on it, because what you're asking is, how do you know when it's time to make the leap? And the fact is, there is never going to be a perfect time.
no, it's
There's
never.
not. And I had the opposite feeling as Tim. Like, I love that you had such conviction about, I'm going to make it, or I'm going down. I'm
Yeah,
not going back. Because my thought was, well, if I crash and burn, I can always get another job, which I bet you a lot of people could. go back if that's what you have to do. But again, you heard Tim, like he spent a long time building personal brand, doing freelance nights and weekends. And I'll be brutally honest, I was not willing to put in that kind of work. I just wasn't
Yeah.
until I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I was like, okay, I need to get back into my tools because I know that's what's important. And I need to make sure I have zero debt. And, these are all the things. I think if you're at all worried about salary, that you should go big and say, I need 6 months of
Hmm.
salary.
Yeah.
I need to be able to pay all of my bills for 6 months,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I know
Go
everybody
ahead.
says two, but I think it's
Yeah.
six, frankly.
Yeah, I saved a year's worth of my
Yeah.
salary. That was a lot to do. And and that's okay. Here's the thing about it though. I think what the point in this conversation is acknowledging that everyone's journey is unique because everyone's circumstances are unique, Uh and so it, it, there's no right or wrong way to make the leap. There's never going to be a right time to make the leap. That's for sure.
No.
You're
Yeah.
never going to you're not going to wake up one day and go, today is the day. You know what I mean? That you feel ready. You're never going to. That's never going to happen. There's always going to be the element of I'm taking a risk, and it's going to be scary AF to quit that job. Trust me, it
Mm,
is. But if you work hard enough and you know what you want, you know what you're really good at, and you put your effort into your brand, and it it has a way of working out. So. And to your point, I quietly, even though I was like, I'm gonna go big or go home, I've said this to myself secretly. I played this what if game. I go, what if I don't get another client all year long? Well,
mm,
okay, then I'll go back and get a normal job. That's you're not going to end up homeless on the street begging for money because you decided to be a freelancer if you did the
yeah.
right work ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay, cool. I hope that answers that question, Jessica. Okay, so let's do one more question and then we'll wrap up here because we're getting close to the top of the hour. BJ wants to know, going back to, he says, given the conversation you had earlier regarding corporate silos and the tendency for corporate teams to be highly productive of their sandboxes, that's so true. How do you recognize, manage, and work within those environments? I have a really cynical view on this, so I'll start. Um, I, this is the conclusion I've come to, and maybe this doesn't necessarily answer the question, but this is what comes to my mind when I read that question. Uh, there is nothing wherever you happen to be in your organization, whether you're an individual contributor, you're a manager, you're a VP, you're a director, wherever you happen to be, there's nothing you can do to make up for the lack of vision, willingness, determination that the people above you have or don't have. I have every time in my career when I had a vision that was bigger than what my boss had, it would never come to fruition there. And so I realized, okay, then I and that's not going to be the case for everybody. That's my experience is that if you have a vision, a dream, you want to do something bigger than what the people above you, the people, the powers that be, if it's bigger than what they can envision and dream, it's never going to happen. I don't know, Deanna, is that
Yeah,
similar to your cynical
I
thought?
100,000% agree. I mean, my perfect example of that is if you go to GoDaddy.com and you click on how to,
Mm-hmm.
and then you ask me to share what my vision was for that, it is 180 degrees. It was so, if I do say so myself, it was beautiful. It supported the entire customer life cycle. It
Yeah.
had, 50 different content types. And I wanted to deeply to partner with frontline people like, call center people who support our customers. I wanted to talk to product people. I wanted to incorporate the instructional designers who are already building beautiful e-learning. Like I have to say, the stuff that was coming out of internal, like the learning and development organization, I know when they sent like a happy clappy survey, every time I was like, this is stunning, guys. You
Mm-hmm.
did a beautiful job. But the fact is, that's like part of corporate culture too. Like your culture has to be dedicated to breaking down the silos, to, I always laughed because there was the join forces was a company value. But the fact is that never happened.
No.
Or it rarely happened, and it didn't happen on a grand scale, like breaking down silos. It was very
And that's
siloed.
not that's not unique to GoDaddy. My other
No, it's
cynical
not
view is
at
I
all.
think most corporate values are fluffy marketing BS to make people feel like they're part of
Yeah.
something bigger than themselves. And whether, the thing that I've experienced is the higher you move up in an organization, the less you see those values illustrated, emulated by those that are constantly reminding you that you need to be living those values every single day. Like
Yeah.
acting with integrity, stuff like that, and we both, Deanna and I, have our own war stories.
Yeah.
That's where when I eventually do these sessions as like a, after dark, we'll have drinks and talk
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that's not a great answer, BJ, because everybody would love to think that. But again, that's another reason I moved out of corporate America, because I wanted to be true to I want to be an instructional designer. I want to use the full, I wrote about this. I think the title of the article was Instructional Designers Use Us to Our Full Ability or a little part of us dies inside every time. And I was sick of that. I was sick of having these kick-ass, amazing, giant solutions that were going to be so great, and having somebody say, yeah, no, we don't have time for that. We don't have budget for that. Sorry,
Well,
bye.
so I'll tell you all a quick story as we wrap up, because I think a lot of times people hear that and they go, well, does that mean you just give up? No, it doesn't mean you give up. It means that you go, okay, well, I'm going to take my greatness elsewhere. And so I told this story to somebody the other day, and when I first got into e-learning development, I was at Kohl's department stores. And I remember I had this meeting with, at the time, one of their heads of learning and development. And that person at the time, I told them what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be more e-learning. I didn't work in the learning development department. I worked in loss prevention, doing learning development, but I wanted to be in the actual L&D department. And this person poo-pooed all over. They're like, no, this isn't the right fit for you. You're a loss prevention person. You shouldn't be doing this. And so years later, I left Kohl's. Obviously, I went to a couple different places. I started freelancing. I worked at GoDaddy, and then I left GoDaddy. And I wrote 2 versions of my book, the eLearning Designer's Handbook. The best satisfaction that I had writing that book was ordering a box of my books and sending it to that corporate office address to that person. I didn't put any message in it. I didn't do anything. I just ordered them a bunch of copies and I sent it to that person at that office, because my dream for myself was bigger than one that they ever had for me. And that's okay. So we'll end it on that note.
That is okay.
That was the best revenge. Well, good. Well, so let me wrap up on a couple quick things, and then we'll close up here. So real quickly, join us next week. What day is that? That'll be July 14th. Our next session will be with Erin Chancellor. We'll be talking about how to build your professional brand by getting out of your own way.
I will be attending.
Yeah, yes. Make sure to check out our free online community, the e-learning designers community. It's completely free. It's just a place for like-minded folks to connect with one another. And then also feel free to check out our Academy program. It actually is open for enrollment between now and the end of next week, so July 16th. So you can check that out for anyone looking to learn storyline, build their skills, build a portfolio, whatever the case might be. So thank you so much, Deanna, for joining me. This was such a fun conversation. So where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
I love connecting on LinkedIn, and my site is deannafurlong.com.
Perfect.
So it's Deanna and furlong, like a horse term. So yeah. Anyway.
Cool.
And yeah, if anybody wants to talk about all those things in between learning and development, because I never wanted to be part of learning and development, or higher ed, which I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah.
I'm all of those things in between, and I'm happy to turn you on to a million different things.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, Deanna, and
Super fun.
thank you everyone else who joined, and have a great rest of your week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.